Okay, yes. It is one of the complicated stories in the Torah. It's very hard to understand how the brothers even considered killing Joseph. And what's most surprising is that the Torah looks at Jacob as someone who was successful with his children. Jacob was considered the success. The other patriarchs weren't as successful. Whether we blame the parent or not, that's not the issue who's to blame. But the fact is that the Torah looks at Jacob as someone who's mitasei shlema, his bed is complete, meaning that bottom line is that his kids are good, whether it's his because of him or not. Bottom line is his kids turned out good. And Jacob's children turned out good, and Abraham and Isaac's children, not necessarily. Ishmael and Esau, they did not turn out good. So the question is, how do we look at this whole episode of how the brothers are willing to kill Joseph? And what Rabbi Sacks talks about is even more than that, how Reuben, it seems that the Torah considers it that he was trying to save Reuben's life, save Joseph's life. And in truth, he also wasn't doing much better. He threw him into a pit. So was he, in any shape or form, was he such a savior? Was it really so great what Reuben did? So again, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why are these brothers considered so righteous? Jacob considered successful with his children. And what exactly is Reuben's role when he tries to save his brother to some extent? However that works, it's not so simple what he did. Was he really saving his brother or not? And although Rabbi Sacks doesn't get into all these details, but I think these are the questions that must be asked when you learn it, whether we come up with answers that satisfy us or we just go a little deeper into it and touch upon the topic. At least we're trying to understand it more every year. When we study it, we try to delve a little deeper and scratch the surface a little more. And hopefully we will absorb some of the explanation, some of the meaning behind this. Would anyone like to share any thoughts on, so far what we've mentioned? Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say, it seemed like the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah, maybe they were the instigators of that, and Reuben was just trying to save him one way or another, so at least not to kill him.
Your phone went, Beverly, twice. I never got to. Maybe life. Somebody from the directions.
And what? Then Yehuda was trying the same thing, was trying to save his life.
Right. So now what you said about Reuben and Yehuda, they both seem to want to save Joseph's life.
Right.
Who really was it that wanted to kill Joseph? Does anyone have?
In the first pasuk, it says that he's walking with the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah and Zilpah.
So he befriended them.
He's walking with them. So I think they were probably the instigators, because he was telling them the dream, and right away it says they hated him. So doesn't say on Reuben or Yehuda that they hated him.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's an interesting way of reading it. Ben says from reading the Chumash itself, it says that Yosef hung out with the Bnei Bilhah, Bnei Zilpah, the children of the maidservants. Again, Jacob had 4 wives. He had Leah and Rachel, and then he had the 2 maidservants that he ended up marrying. So that was Bilhah and Zilpah. And the verse says, after it mentions that Joseph hung out with the maidservants' children, it says that Joseph brought their evil talk to his father. So Ben sees this as a implication that that Joseph took the talk of the maidservants' children. That's an interesting way of reading it, I must say, and it's a very interesting how I'm impressed because it does seem like the simple wording. So that's a good call, Ben. However, Rashi doesn't learn that way, but I do see how you're seeing it in the verse. So that's definitely it took some thought to come up with that. Rashi learns, interestingly enough, that the brothers used to make fun of the maidservants' children. And Joseph tried to make them feel more comfortable, and he befriended them. And he stuck up for them. And so when it says that he brought the evil, their evil words to his father, their evil reports, their unseemly conduct. So the understanding is that he brought the information of the brothers, what they used to do to the maidservants' children, what they used to do to them, how they would make fun of them and harass them or tease them. That's what he would bring to his father. So what comes out is that who really hated Joseph was Leah's kids, not the children of the maidservants, but it was Leah's children who were, Joseph brought their bad things to their father, and they hated Joseph. So if you think about the names of the children, you have Reuben, Shimon, Levy, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun. Those are the children of Leah. And from those children, the older ones was Reuben, Shimon, Levy, and Yehuda. And from those four, you would say they were the ones who had this hatred. Yisachar and Zevulun were younger than the older 4. And therefore they would have, Leah stopped giving birth for a little while, and she had her maidservant marry Jacob. So Zilpah married Jacob. And then what ended up happening was she did get pregnant later. And so those other children that she had were like the second wave. And those children would have been less verbal and angry. They weren't so involved as much as the older ones. So it's really Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. These were the ones who would have had a say. They were the older ones, the machos, the ones that called the shots. And we know that Reuben and Yehuda were the ones who tried to save Joseph. So who were the ones who wanted to kill Joseph? Must have been Shimon and Levi. That's what would come out. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say there was another thing that bothered me in here was that he calls Joseph Ben Skunim. But Joseph was not the youngest. Benjamin was the youngest. And the second wife of Leah was also younger than him. Am I right?
Who was younger than him?
Leah had two more children after Rachel had the child, isn't it? Or was it
No.
before? No, it was before.
Before.
Okay. So he was second youngest. Okay.
So the thing is that Jacob, when he had Joseph, he was already quite an old man.
So he was called Ben Zekunim.
So he's already called a Ben Zekunim.
What does that mean?
Maybe another one.
What does that
Benjamin is even younger.
A Ben Zekunim is when you want that youngest child, the young child who's in your old age, and you have a young child, they call him a Ben Zekunim.
I never heard that.
A child
in Yiddish they call him Mezinik.
What?
In Yiddish, it's a Mezinik.
Mezinik. It's a concept, Susan, that you sort of want, at an old age, you sort of think this one's going to help me in my old age. Now that I'm getting older, this child, everyone else is going to get married off, but this one will be.
This one's going to stay with me and help me. That's what you.
It has that connotation. It's not exactly, you're expecting them to stay, to stay with you day and night, but you sort of have that feeling of like, now I'm all set. Yes,
wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Right. But it is a common thing people tell someone that, if they have a number of kids, and then when you think they're older already, they have the white beard already, they have a child, you say, oh, you wanted a Ben Zekunim. Baruch Hashem, you got blessed with now you have your Ben Zekunim. Now you have your child of
right. My grandmother's youngest son was the Kleine Zun. The Kleine Zun.
The Kleine Zun, right. So
very interesting.
What comes out from this is that Shimon and Levy, believe it or not, and I shouldn't be saying this because I'm a Levi, but Shimon and Levy did have this element of anger, and they had some element of violence to them, because we find previously that they killed out the entire city of Shem. So, in last week's parsha. So what we see is that here as well, Shimon and Levy are the ones who want to kill Joseph. And later on in Parshas Vayeishev, when Jacob blesses his children, he rebukes them and blesses them. And what he tells Shimon and Levy is that their skill with weapons is a craft that's stolen from Esau. He says, you got the wrong, you got the wrong instruments. You took something from Esau, guys. You took the violence. That's not a Jewish, this is not exactly meant for you. Esau was blessed to live by the sword. It does not befit the children of Jacob and their weapons of violence. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, that the court doesn't have the ability to punish and to even kill, the capital punishment. But what it does mean is, that they did certain things without the full support of the chief scholar of the time, and that would have been their father. So they took things in their own hands, and a little too far. With not that they were necessarily wrong, but they didn't ask advice from the scholar, from the great scholar of the day. And And Jacob goes further and he curses their anger. He says, cursed be their anger. Let my soul not enter their conspiracy, and let my honor have no part in their assembly. And that refers to the story of Korach, who came from Levi. That's another story about the Levites. So on the one hand, we find that the Levites were extremely righteous in the time of Moses, except for Korach was the one story where we have where someone was jealous. But in general, we find that the Levites followed God's wishes very much. We speak very highly, but there, the history of the Levites, there are some, there is the story of killing out Shechem, which is included with Shimon and the Levite and Levi. And we have this story of killing Joseph, that Shimon and Levi wanted to kill Joseph. And Jacob says, let me have no part in their assembly. And because in their anger, they killed men, meaning the city of Shechem. And they wanted to kill Joseph. So so we do find that Jacob was not happy with their whole style of the way they acted. And cursed be their anger, their rage, for it is fierce, and their fury, for it is harsh. And what is interesting is he only curses their anger. He doesn't curse them. And then he says, I will separate them by removing Levi from the group of the 12 tribes, that Levi now becomes, works in the temple. He's not really part of the 12 tribes, and they don't get an inheritance of the land, and I shall scatter them among Israel. And ultimately, both of them were scattered. The Levites and the Shimonites were scattered among Israel, and the Shimonites were scribes and teachers. They ended up being scribes and teachers, and they taught the Jewish people's children. So what we see is that although they had this negative element of anger, it seems like they, overcame it, because otherwise I don't think the other tribes would have wanted them to teach their children. And the Levites, we do find that they were considered the most righteous of all the tribes in the desert. They circumcised their children when everyone else was afraid to. They had a lot of, they did not sin with the other sins that the nations did, but it actually came from their strong, they were very firm in their, in what they did. And that actually was used for the good. They were firm in what they did, means that they didn't end up sinning in all these scenarios where people who were wishy-washy, they fell into the traps, but the Levites didn't. And it came from that same trait of either using it for the negative or using it for the positive, but it's that same trait of being a very strong-willed people. And that was the Levites. But I'm just, mentioning that it seems that maybe Shimon as well, they might have overcome it based on, Jacob cursed their anger, and ultimately it would seem like maybe they, they must have, we used their tefillin. The scribes were from Shimon, and the teachers. So we wanted them to teach our children. They must have had good traits, it would seem. Yes, Moshe.
The Leviim can they be a melech in Israel?
Can the Levites be kings? So the Levites, there was the Kohanim are part of the Levites, and we do know that there was a whole Chashmonaim kingdom that's connected to the story of Hanukkah. And they became the kings in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash at the end of now. was it really correct that they took over the kingdom completely? Really, the kings are supposed to come from Judah, but they definitely had that same strong-willed element to them that they used for the good in the time of Hanukkah. So thank you for bringing this up, because it actually is a continuation of what I was mentioning earlier, that the Levites had this very strong-willed way of doing things. And although they used violence when they were younger, and keep in mind, they killed out the city of Shechem when they were 13 years old. So we're dealing with they were young at the time. In America, they would have been juveniles. They were not, but in Jewish law, they were considered adults. But at the same time, it's not exactly that they did something wrong, but that what was wrong was that they did not ask their father, and therefore, their violence was not acceptable. Yes, Ben.
I thought Moses gave up the spiritual leadership to Aaron, his brother, but he kept the reins of controlling the nation itself. And I think there was something there, even God said something about it too, that Moses is like a king and Aaron is the Kohen Gadol.
So yeah, Moses was, in charge of the Jewish people, the leader. He was the Levite,
And they were both
Aaron was
Levites.
the high priest.
Yeah.
Aaron became the Kohen Gadol, and it does say that Moses was meant to be the Kohen Gadol, but when he refused to take the leadership, it ended up Hashem gave it to Aaron. Yes, Isaac.
Not that Yaakov or any father would curse a child, but you also have Umakalalecha or couldn't curse a Jew. So
Right. Although what is interesting is that if one of the things that I want to mention in this class, which we're trying to shed a little light on why the brothers were not guilty of murder. We're trying to shed some light on why we're looking at Jacob, as Jacob did a good job in bringing up his children, and the brothers were not guilty of murder, and so on. We're trying to shed some light on this. So one of the things that I wanted to mention is that the brothers, when they saw Joseph wanted to tell Jacob all of the bad things that they did, the brothers were nervous that Jacob is going to utter a curse against them and they might all die. So even though, as Isaac says, makalelcha or, which means that those who curse you will be cursed, and that would seemingly imply not only to Abraham, but maybe to his descendants as well. But nevertheless, the brothers were not confident that their father might not utter some type of a curse against them. And they saw this entire situation as a life and death situation. So again, we're trying to shed a little light on the brothers, why they were so angry at Joseph. And one of the explanations is that they were very nervous of Joseph, that he's like coming to kill them. And they sort of felt that they need to do some self-defense here. And when someone comes to kill you, you are allowed to kill them in self-defense.
I thought that the problem was, and that they formed a Bezdin or whatever to decide this, that he was just as Abraham had a Yishmael and Yitzchak had an Esau. They were concerned that one of them may be the evil one, as it were. And as Yosef kept acting like a Bechor, even though he wasn't, it really started getting into, And his father was treating him even like a Bechor in terms of giving him extra and doing things or whatever, that they thought that there was a sakana to the nation. And they actually said he was chayav misa as a, like you say, he was going to get killed or whatever, as a ritzeach, and that's what drove them.
Right, but I guess you would need to add, which is brought down, such a concept, but you need to add what the fact that he's similar to Yishmael and Esav. What specific act that did he do that would make him guilty, deserving of the death penalty? Meaning, Esav went around.
Lashon hara, when he went to tell on his brothers to his father.
Yeah, but Lashon hara, does that really deserve a death penalty from Bezdin?
For who? Before Kriyas HaTorah, it's whatchamacallit? Isn't it like a Ben Noach?
I don't know if I've seen that. Have you seen that explanation?
No, I haven't seen it. I'm barely driving.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they bring such a concept down, because Lashon hara, although it's a terrible sin, I don't know that even that it would be considered a death penalty. But it is something to look into. I don't want to say either way, but it is interesting.
I can't speak to any other Aveira because none is mentioned. The fact that he combed his hair,
right,
and kept fixing himself up.
Right. What's so bad about that? Exactly. But so the answer that I shared was more the fact that he was going to cause that the father is going to utter a curse against the brothers, and he's really a murderer. Joseph is really a murderer because he's causing them to die, and they have an obligation to save their lives out of self-defense. So they're not killing him because he's deserving of death. They're killing him as self-defense to save their own lives.
Rabbi Smith?
And that sheds a little light on the story. Let me just answer Ben. He has his hand up for a little while. Yes,
you know
Ben.
what? You can let Phyllis talk.
Phyllis.
It occurs to me that Shimon and Levy, in particular, they wouldn't have asked Yaakov for the permission or the counsel to kill off Shechem, because later, I think it is that Yaakov says to them, you may cause the hatred of the nations around us, and then they will come and kill us for doing such a thing, when he was reprimanding them. So I think they would have been afraid maybe to ask his permission to do that.
Well, we know.
Even though rape is very horrible, I mean, they did take advantage of Dinah.
Right. But the thing is that doesn't explain, that doesn't answer that what they did was wrong. In other words, we still see that what they did was wrong. They should have asked their father. Whatever he would have said should have gone. That's the way it should be. He would have said, don't kill them out. Then that's what they should have listened to. They are young. They, it's not like they've gone through the entire, it's not like they've been on a Jewish court for 50 years and they know, the ins and outs of capital punishment. You know what I mean? They've been around for 13 years. They're young kids. They might be very scholarly, but they, when was the last time they gave such a verdict? And how much knowledge do they have in these type of verdicts? Do they, have they received tradition on, and do they have experience in this? And for them to go and do that without asking their father was considered wrong. Now, if he would have told them, don't do it, they should have listened to that. So that really is, it's not an answer, I don't think, to what they did. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say, Jacob asked Joseph, go and see how and what your brothers are doing.
Right.
So he's coming and reporting. He's not going to lie to his father. I don't know if you can call it Lashon Hara if he reports to his father what he asked.
Right. But this story, you're mixing the two stories together, I think. This story is before he goes and asks Joseph to go check out how his brothers are doing in Shechem. Here we're dealing with simply, he would bring.
But they were not mad at him about today. They were mad at him about what he was doing before.
Right. But the thing is that he's not necessarily, he's what information is he bringing to his father? His father wanted to know later how they are.
Yeah.
What information is he bringing? He's bringing information about their sins. They did this wrong. They do that not right. That's not what the father had wanted his son to do. Jacob wanted Joseph to tell him if they're okay. Did someone get hurt? Anyone broke their leg? How are the animals okay? Are the animals hungry? Is there enough water over there in Shem? Is there enough food for the animals to eat? Should we find some other avenue? Are the goyim bothering you? He wasn't asking him, tell me some lashon hara about the brothers. Tell me what the brothers are doing. Are they saying brachas on their food? Did they put tefillin on? Are they, davening 3 times a day? He wasn't asking, necessarily about the lashon hara. Are they gossiping all day, or that
he
wasn't.
Didn't say bring me dirt on them. He didn't say that. He just said see what they're doing.
Right, but anyway, that's later on. That story is later, and here. What he's doing is bringing all the lashon hara that he hears when they're playing soccer. Who comes and tells the father? Joseph is coming and telling the father all the lashon hara. And later on, his father asks him, "Go check out how they are, what they're up to, what's going on in Shechem." But that's a story later. But anyway, in any event, so this is some of the understanding. Now, the question really is. The real question is, what was Jacob's role in causing this hatred that Jacob's role in causing the hatred of the brothers to Joseph? Jacob made his son Joseph a coat of many colors, or a coat of Sinus Pasim, a very expensive woolen coat. So the question really is, what was Jacob thinking? And why did he have a special relationship with Joseph instead of trying to be equal and share share his attention with all of his children? Why was he giving special attention to Joseph? So that's a question that also deserves to be asked. And one of the commentaries, one of the explanations that's given is that Jacob saw the qualities of each of his children. And he saw of course, part of being a parent is you see their issues, their challenges, and you see their qualities. And what Jacob saw in his older sons, Reuben, he saw a certain element of a challenge that Reuben had, was that Reuben was not happy with Jacob's personal life with his spouses. And that's why Reuben switched the beds, which is a story in its own right. I'm not going to get into it, but Reuben, so he felt that Reuben doesn't really deserve, he's sort of ruined. He's sort of ruined his reputation. He doesn't have the power, the right. He doesn't have that proper midos, proper character to be the leader. And then he thought about Shimon and Levy. Then he said, Shimon and Levy, they killed out the city of Shechem on their own. They also don't have the proper character to be a righteous leader. And then he thought about Judah. And Judah, he said, maybe does have. And therefore, there is a source that explains that Jacob actually made a coat for Judah. And Judah was a certain, was unique. And really, Judah, as Jacob saw this, Judah was meant for kingship, which we find later. The kings came from Judah. And then Jacob, his wife that he really got married for was Rachel. And Rachel's son, Joseph had certain unique qualities. Kabbalistic terms, Joseph is called Yesod. And Yesod is the power, Yesod, which literally means foundation, but it has to do with bringing all the other character traits outward to the world. Jacob saw that Joseph, he is the worldly guy. He's the guy who's able to connect. Yesod is the concept of connection. And Jacob had that ability to connect with the outside world, with the physical world, much more than anyone else. All the patriarchs, they were like righteous, but they were secluded. They were sheltered. They secluded themselves. They were shepherds in the fields. Jacob saw in him the ability ability to connect with the world, with the secular world, and not get influenced by it. And therefore, Jacob was very impressed with Joseph. And what he wanted from Joseph was Joseph should be the leader of the brothers. The brothers, he should show the brothers the path and be like the leader of them. That's what Jacob saw. That, the brothers have talents, and there's one that's, really unique. And that's why he made him that coat of many colors, as, someone of royalty or dignified should have to give to have the others learn from him. Of course, the brothers were too immature to understand that, and therefore they had the physical jealousy of Joseph. They were physically jealous, but in truth, they should have, understood that Jacob knows more than, what's going, understands very well what's going on. And he specifically wants Joseph to have influence over the brothers. So ultimately, what ends up happening is the brothers, of course, are jealous of Joseph, and what ends up happening is that they want to kill Joseph. And the story here is that Reuben is very nervous because Joseph comes to see how his brothers are doing. He goes to Shem. The father sends him to Shem. And there's a difference of opinion among the commentaries. If Joseph how much does he know about what his brothers want to do to him? According to one opinion, he knows very well they want to kill him, and he's still willing to go forward. According to another opinion, he doesn't have it. It's not so clear. It's not so clear that they want to kill him. But in any event, Joseph, goes further and tries to find them. And as he's coming towards them, one of them tells the other one, Shimon tells Levy, let's go and kill him. And we'll throw him into one of the pits. And we'll just say that a wild beast ate it. And then we won't have to worry about his dreams, because he had these dreams that implied that he's going to be king over them. And they, of course, did not like hearing that. Now, Reuben heard this, and the verse says, and he saved him from their hands. And he said, let's not kill him. And instead, he said, don't spill blood, throw him into a pit, and don't put your hand to strike him. Don't strike him. And don't strike him, by killing him. Let's just throw him into one of the pits. And this he did in order, because he planned on going back and trying to save him a day later. So he's going to come back the next day and he'll take him out of the pit. Now, the surprising thing here is that Joseph, they're angry at Joseph. They're jealous. They're jealous. They don't want to kill him. Reuben says, "Let's not kill him." But what does he do? He throws him into a pit that we know has snakes and scorpions, and he knew that. There were snakes and scorpions in the pit. According to Jewish law, and we learned this in the morning class, that a pit that has snakes and scorpions, if someone falls into it, if you throw someone into it, according to Jewish law, the wife can go get remarried. You don't even have to find out. I mean, even if we can't find out if the guy lived or not, the wife can go get remarried. We assume that the guy dies. So what was Reuben thinking? He's not going to kill him, but he'll throw him into the pit. Yes, Ben. You're muted. Ben, you are muted.
It said in the Torah that the pit did not have water in it.
Right.
If it didn't have water, how did the other animals survive there? Snakes and scorpions.
So
it was a clean hole that he threw him into.
Right. The thing is that the commentaries, and based on the Talmud says that it didn't have water to tell you, didn't have water, but it did have something else. It did have snakes and scorpions. Specifically says it didn't have water to tell you that it did have snakes and scorpions. And so, in fact, one of the explanations of that Talmudic statement is that if your brain doesn't have water, meaning Torah, then don't think that you're okay. If you don't have Torah in your mind, automatically you have snakes and scorpions. There's no such thing as being like having nothing. It's either Torah or bad stuff. So you got to make sure to fill your head. Constantly think of Torah. Water is comparable to Torah. So if you don't have Torah, you have snakes and scorpions. There's no such thing as being in the middle. There's no middle ground. But in any event, what was Reuben thinking? So commentaries talk about this. One of the commentaries says something very interesting, that when you that there's a difference, of course, between murdering someone with your hands and putting them in a situation that's very dangerous. And putting them in a situation that is very dangerous is you sort of leave it up to God. I can't hear you, Isaac. Did you say something?
I said this, the grumma.
Oh, grumma. Is that what you wanted to say? That one. You're muted, Isaac. Sorry.
No, I'm not. I said it's the grumma argument.
Right. There is that, but there's more to it than that. The Or HaChaim, one of the big commentaries on the Chumash, mentions an interesting point. He says that humans do have free will. Humans have free will. They can kill. When you go and kill someone, God forbid, the person has to have very strong merit not to get killed. In other words, the person is really judged, fully judged. When you're left in the subject to animals killing a human, there is less free will on the animal's part, and therefore it's a very interesting point. It's very deep and philosophical about how life works and how death works. But what comes out from this Or HaChaim, and people ask a lot of questions on this Or HaChaim, but the holy Or HaChaim said this as an explanation on this parsha, that he says that Reuven was thinking that if he throws Joseph in the pit, we'll see what God wants to do with him. You're giving it more over to God than if you try to do it yourself. We try to do it ourselves. Maybe God will save him, maybe not, but we're really relying on a major miracle. But if we throw him in the pit, then it's much more in God's hands, because animals don't have full free will like humans. And therefore, it's really subject to what God wants much more than if we try to kill it. And what ultimately happened, of course, is we see that Joseph was saved because he was righteous. But what we're understanding from the story is a much deeper explanation and understanding than what you see on the surface. So you read the surface of the Chumash, you really didn't touch the surface. And what we've done is now dug a little deeper and tried to come to an understanding of what the brothers were thinking, what the father was thinking, and what Reuben was thinking. And now we go up to Rabbi Sacks, although we only have 14 minutes left, but now we see what Rabbi Sacks has to say. And Rabbi Sacks, the title is How to Change the World. And he brings at first from Maimonides. And Maimonides brings a very powerful statement, repeated many times by great rabbis who gave drushas. They often liked repeating this statement of the rabbis. The Lubavitcher Rebbe used to repeat this often. Other great rabbis would also repeat this, that the Maimonides writes, he says, everyone, we should see ourselves throughout the year as if our deeds and those of the world are evenly poised between good and bad, so that our next act may change both the balance of our lives and that of the world. So we're on a scale, and one act that we do could make the difference. We could tip the scale for the good, or God forbid, tip the scale for the bad. And that should be our mindset always. Now, that's quite a powerful statement. And of course, Rabbi Sacks says, you normally think like, who am I to really to be so important in the world? Who am I that the value of my deed, one little good deed or sin that I do, how important is it? And Maimonides writes, you gotta consider yourself on a scale, and you might tip that scale to the good, or God forbid, to the bad. And then Rabbi Sacks touches upon the story of Joseph, and how it seems that Jacob loved Joseph more than his brothers, or he made for him that special coat, and they were jealous of their father. Brothers were jealous of their father's love.
You can stay for the end of the show.
And it provoked the anger of the brothers. And then came the moment of opportunity. The brothers were away, far from home, and their anger and envy reached a point, and they decided, let's kill him. And of course, as I mentioned, this is Shimon and Levy talking. And Reuben disagreed. He knew that what they were proposing was very wrong, and he protested. And then Rabbi Sacks brings this, I'm not sure why he words it this way, but Rabbi Sacks words it that it makes a statement that cannot be literally true. And we reading the Torah know this. The text says, and Reuben heard and saved Joseph from them. So I'm not sure what Rabbi Sacks means by that. I would not word it that way. Of course, everything in the Torah, is correct, obviously. But Rabbi Sacks says it's not literal, but I think it is literal. Reuben heard and he saved Joseph from them. They wanted to kill him. Literally, he, saved them from murdering Joseph, whether he almost killed him by throwing him into the pit, but he did definitely save them from physically murdering. There's obviously a difference between first-degree murder and I guess, I don't know, throwing someone into a pit with snakes. Would that be called second degree? Where's our lawyer over here, Isaac? What would that be called in legal terms, criminal terms? But I would think that there would be a difference between physically.
It's reckless endangerment.
That's
Okay.
being go there, right? Or you can do manslaughter, reckless manslaughter. You put him in a situation where you pretty much figure he's going to get killed.
But that's different than first-degree murder.
Typically, yeah.
And first-degree murder would be a much bigger sentence in American law. You would
That's
think.
the absolute highest sentence. You can't get sentenced for more than that.
Okay, so that's it. And the same thing would be in Jewish law, of course, that, you know, murder, physical murder, is obviously much worse than causing someone, as Isaac mentioned earlier, there's a concept of grumma, just causing someone to die versus physically murdering them. Yes, Susan.
I have a question that you said that the father cursed the actions of his children. Is that
First, their anger.
Oh, okay, he cursed their anger. So is that possible to, what does that do? Cursing someone's anger. That's
Meaning
not
he wanted that they shouldn't have that anger anymore. He
Okay.
wanted it to be dissolved.
Okay.
And
But
showed them.
cursing their emotions, that's not any, to me, that's not going to do anything. Or maybe,
Right.
I don't know. What do I know? I'm just a novice.
Something to think about when we get to Parshas Vayechi. Maybe we can look more into it. It's in a few Parshas from now.
Okay.
So so Rabbi Sacks continues and he says,
Rabbi,
yes, Ezra.
give the example of Yaakov and Rachel when she took the terafim. All right, she took them, you can say emotionally, because she wanted to keep them away from her father. And Yaakov, cursed the individual who took them. He didn't know it was his wife, but it caused. But it caused.
It caused death.
Caused her death.
Yeah, very good example, Ezra.
Okay.
So in this particular case, when he curses their anger, he's hoping that that to stop them from having that anger again, because if their anger reappears, then they will be the recipient of the curse.
Interesting. Okay, Susan, I hope you got that. That's an interesting observation, Ezra, of explaining, a nice way of explaining it. So Rabbi Sacks continues. He says that Reuben wanted to save them, sort of, and he says, let's not kill them. Let's throw him alive. Let's not kill Yosef. Let's throw him alive into one of the pits and let him die. That way we will not be directly guilty of murder. His intention was to come back to the pit later when the others were elsewhere, rescue Joseph. So when the Torah says Reuben heard and saved him from them, it is using the principle that God accounts a good intention as a deed. Because he didn't actually, that's what Rabbi Sacks means, that he didn't actually save him from them. He tried to save him from them because he ended up getting sold into slavery. But I still would say he saved him because he saved him from death. He ended up going into being sold as a slave, but he still saved him. So I don't know why Rabbi Sacks doesn't like the word saved him. Literally, I think it's a very literal meaning. He saved him from death. He actually, he ended up not fully saving him. So it's not as much as, hindsight. I'm sure Reuben regretted Reuben regretted what he did, but at the same time, he did save him. Nevertheless, Reuben wanted to save Joseph, and a good God accounts a good intention as a deed. And Rabbi Sacks says that he failed. And so That's how he's wording it. The moment passed, the time he acted, it was too late because Joseph was already sold. And the Medrash says, if only Reuben had known what God would write about him in the Torah, and Reuben, that it says, and Reuben heard and saved him from them, he would have lifted Joseph bodily on his shoulders and taken him back to his father. Now, what does this mean? Consider what would have happened had Reuben actually acted at the moment and saved him. So Joseph would not have been sold as a slave. He would not have been taken to Egypt, would not have been worked in Potiphar's house. He would not have been attracted to Potiphar's wife, not have been thrown into prison with a false charge. He would not have interpreted the dreams of the butler or the baker. He would not have done the same 2 years later for Pharaoh to interpret Pharaoh's dream. And he would not have been made viceroy of Egypt. He would not have brought his family to, or Jacob wouldn't, well, he would not have brought his family to stay there. Now, to be sure, God had already told Abraham that know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. So the Israelites would have become slaves, but at least they would not have had this happen as a result of their own family dysfunctions. So Rabbi Sacks is bringing out from this is that, there's certain decisions that God already made about man, but at the same time, it doesn't have to play itself out exactly as it did had we done things differently. And if only Reuben had known what we know, if only he had been able to read the book. Now, Rabbi Sacks then brings an interesting story of an African-American boy who moved to a very white neighborhood in Washington, and sitting with his siblings on the front step, he waited to see how they would be greeted. And he says the passerby, they did turn to look at them, but no one gave them a smile or even a glance of recognition. And all the stories that he had heard about how the whites treated the blacks, he says, seemed to be coming true. And he writes later that I knew that I was not welcome in this town. I knew we should never have moved here. I knew I wouldn't like that, we would not be liked and wanted, and we would have no friends. And then as he's thinking these thoughts, a woman passed by on the other side of the road, and she turned to the children with a broad smile and said, "Welcome." And she disappeared into the house there. And then she emerged minutes later with drinks and cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. And she brought them over to the children, making them feel at home. In that moment, this young man writes later, years later, when he wrote a book, he said that moment changed his life. It gave him a sense of belonging where there was none before. And it made him realize that a black family could feel at home in a white area, and that there could be relationships that were colorblind. There could be relationships that were colorblind. Okay, that's an interesting line. Over the years, he learned to admire much about this woman across the street. It was the first spontaneous act of greeting that became a definitive memory. It broke down a wall of separation and turned strangers into friends. And this young man, his name is Stephen Carter. He became a law professor at Yale. He wrote a book, and he wrote a book about this episode, and he called it Civility. And the name of the woman was Sarah Kestenbaum, of course, a Jewish woman, religious Jew. And he wrote that that's called chesed, kindness. He writes that in Jewish tradition, what this woman did was called chesed, acts of kindness. And which in turn derived from the understanding that human beings are made in the image of God. Civility, he adds, itself may be seen as part of chesed. It indeed requires kindness towards fellow citizens, strangers, even when it's hard. So To this day, he adds, I can close my eyes and feel on my tongue the smooth, slick sweetness of the cream cheese and jelly sandwiches that I gobbled on that summer afternoon when I discovered how a single act of civility can change a life forever. And this is how Rabbi Sacks brings that story. He says, a single life is like a universe. Brings from the Mishnah. Change a life, you begin to change the universe. That is how we make a difference. One life at a time, one day, one act. We never know in advance what a single act may have, what effect a single act might have, and sometimes we never know it at all. But Sarah Kestenbaum, like Reuben, never did have a chance to read the book that told the story of the long-term consequences of that moment. But she acted and she did not hesitate, and neither should we. Our next act might tilt the balance, might tilt the scale in someone else's life, as well as our own. So we can make a difference in the world, and when we do so, we become Hashem's partner in the work of redemption, bringing the world a little closer to the world that ought to be. And so that's Rabbi Sacks's conclusion about the story of Reuben. Very nice lesson of how we see how important it is, even if we're not going to be able to read the book, but our actions, every little detail and deeds that we do. And I guess what this means is how careful we have to be from anything negative, even small things that, it's almost impossible to control ourselves from small little thing here. You say one thing there, and yet, who knows what type of effect we have. And then for sure, on a positive note, a small deed could have major impact. And even if we don't, you never know what they're going to write about you, especially nowadays with all the video cameras and everything. You never know how much, one small thing could have a major impact. We might even be able to see it. So you got to really be careful. And anyways, I think it's a beautiful insight of Rabbi Sacks. I hope you enjoyed this class. We'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Hashem.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Beautiful
Thank you
class.
very
Wonderful.
much, Rabbi.
Thank
Beautiful.
you, Rabbi. Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.